Hello, everyone, and welcome to the May Self-Care Summit. This topic this month is all about May Mental Health Month. We thought this month we'll talk about depression, PTSD, and mental health for people of color. I'm so excited to be bringing in over 10 guest experts this week in all of these different panels for them to come in and share their own personal mental health journeys, as well as helpful tools that they have to share with you to navigate your journey. If you'd like to hop on here with us on the Zoom, you can sign up at aditicreative.com/summit. I'm so grateful that you're here today and spending time with us. And I'm so excited to be talking about these really, really important topics. Just a year and a half ago, I was hitting my second worst depression episode that I had had. And I remember in that moment telling myself that if I ever make it to the other side of this, then I'm going to help other people through their pain too. And I feel like we're coming full circle because this is a complete product of that, to be able to have these conversations. Someone had posted today, one of our panelists, Gretchen, about how depression is not visible. And that's so true. We never know when people are struggling. People are really good at pretending and faking it because it's really hard, right? There's such a stigma around these different issues. And I'm so excited to be able to provide this platform, a safe space where we can talk about real life stuff. And hopefully that you can feel safe to be able to get the support and ideas to help you through your journey as well. All right, so I am going to bring on all of our panelists here. Hi, everyone. Y'all are
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
all right. So I'd love to start today's panel with starting with introductions. And I'd love to hear your story about what you experienced as with depression yourself, or your experience with depression in general, and what was so hard about it. So I'm going to pass it over to Gretchen. Go for it.
All right. So I was first diagnosed with major depression when I was 19. And I've always been a strong person, very independent and wanting to have success. So I just keep pushing through because, you see those Nike commercials, just do it. So it's like, okay, I'll just suck it up and keep pushing through. And in my family, we didn't really talk about any mental health struggles. So that I think made it a lot harder because it definitely is prevalent throughout my whole family. And so I just kept pushing through. And what I found was that it impacted everything that I did, including how I showed up at work. So when I was 28, I had a mini stroke from work stress. And then as I got into my 30s and 40s, my children were having some mental health issues. I was having more, my husband was. And um, I got to a point in my late 40s where I was having multiple suicidal episodes. And it got so bad that as I was driving home from work, to not drive into those telephone poles all the time. So the hardest thing for me was that I always felt that I needed to take care of everybody else. And so, as all of my family was having mental health struggles, or all of the folks that I helped at work, they were having struggles. So, I was there helping them. I never felt that it was okay to take time to think about my own mental health and to take time away. And I didn't even know the tools to use. I had seen therapists, I had tried different types of medicine, but I didn't really find the thing that worked for me until 2017. And that's when I started to learn about mindset work, and that really changed everything.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Go ahead, Brian. And you guys can just go ahead after that. Dr. K after Brian.
Right on. Well, thank you, Aditi, and thank you, Gretchen. That is a really powerful story. I I don't have a diagnosis. I was never diagnosed with depression, but I certainly know what it feels like to be immobile. I am a gay man in my early 40s now, and so I grew up in the closet. I like to joke around that I learned spycraft at an early age going through LGBT Quantico because you have to keep everything that's important to you a total secret. And so there was this time where I sort of ended up out at sea and didn't have any sort of sense of belonging or place to belong, and had internalized the idea that I don't belong and that people like me don't belong. And that led me on this path. I look back on it now and I can see the adventure within it, but it was a path of drug addictions, um, and being totally out of control and having no agency over my own choices that I was making. And when you feel out of control like that, and you don't understand your own decision making process, that leads further and further into this place of feeling like really depressed, really um, I don't know, out to sea. And so only in the last couple of years have I realized, Gretchen, I echo you, it's mindset work. There's something that I've been like doing as you become more aware of your inner narrative, you can kind of get a sense of what that inner narrative is telling you. And the more and more awareness you bring to your inner narrative, the less and less power that inner narrative has on our lives. And I became aware of thoughts like, I don't measure up, like I'm fundamentally broken, all of these things that were unconscious, but I was thinking them. And when you're thinking things that are unconscious, then you don't even realize you're thinking them. So you don't have any way to find the cure or find the way out. And so what really started to help me was learning how to become aware of my own inner narrative and my own limiting thinking.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Brian, Gretchen. Yeah, in my case, it was I was a high achieving student in high school. Was applied to all the top colleges, everything else. Ended up going to Cornell University. I was 16 at the time because I skipped a grade. And what I didn't realize was just how much of a shock that was going to be to my system. My identity was to that point was wrapped up around being the smart kid because I was overweight. It never got much interest from girls, anything else, but I'm the smart kid, so that will always carry me. So I go to Cornell, and basically they graded you on a curve, so it really didn't matter what percentage you got correct on any exam. It was how you did relative to everyone else, and everyone else is also from the top 5% of their high school class. So suddenly I got my first, God forbid, B, in my life, and several of them, and even a C. And all of a sudden, that identity of I'm the smart kid was shaken. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my worth in the world was. And it really sent me into, a rough place for the next several years. But the beauty of, looking back on where I was is that it allowed me to understand certain things about the human mind and certain things about our experiences that are that you almost can't, you can't understand it unless you experience it. I remember one of the things that really used to annoy me back then was when people would basically equate depression with sadness or like prolonged sadness. It's like, oh, you're just sad. Do something to cheer you up. Like, it's not that. It's a fundamental shaking of identity. It's a fundamental questioning of why am I here? What is my purpose? There's so much more to it. And thankfully, I was able to understand that as we focus on some of those almost existential questions, that it helped me, and certainly also came to my aid two other times, once in my 20s and once in my 30s, that my world was shaken again, and I had to start to understand, okay, wait, I've been through this whole thing before. I'm not going to go all the way down that road again. What do I need to do right now to understand how to move forward? And then ultimately, it led me to a change in careers and everything that allowed me to do what I do today. So in some ways, I wouldn't change a thing.
Thank you so much. So powerful. It's amazing to hear all the different stories and also hear some of the similarities between all of them. For me, I felt like I had a little bit of a similar story with Dr. K, where I was doing all the things. I was in school, I was following all the things that we were told to do, getting the job, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think after that, I was kind of like, well, now what? like what happens now? And it just felt this kind of like deadly feeling that, is this it? Like, is this just my life for the rest of my life now? Like, you just wake up, you go to work, you come home, you eat dinner, you go to sleep, and you just repeat that again for 50 more years. Like, that really just set me off on this spiral where I started seeking and looking for something different. I tried applying to different jobs, and like nothing was really working out in a way that was making me feel better or anything. And it was just causing me to have this self discovery for myself. And I found that, I would often hear like, you should just be grateful. I had a job at a top company and I really struggled with that. It's like, how can I not feel happy or feel good when I have things that everybody else wants to have? And so I struggled with like, oh, I should be more grateful, yet I was dying inside. So it was just this weird kind of situation for me. And then I decided to go ahead and follow my calling and what I was feeling within. And I ended up going to grad school and moving to Chicago. And, I thought, I was starting on this path of rainbows and daisies, but that's actually when my worst depression hit me. Um, I went through a heartbreak, and heartbreak was really just the trigger of what was already happening inside of me for many, many years, suppressed. And it just opened up this explosion that I just did not know what to do with. And for 2 years, I was in a really dark space, and I tried everything, like all the things that people say to do. And I tried to, like, be more cheerful. I tried to take dance classes, try some art, like everything. Nothing was working. And that's when I knew that it was time to do some deeper work. And it wasn't going to be this surface level answer. And nobody was going to be able to find that answer for me but myself. And that's what really set me off on that journey for 2 years. And like Dr. K had mentioned, when he had his second time it happened, I guess like a second wave for me when it happened a year and a half ago, I had the same thought that, whoa, I cannot go down there again. Because I remember where I was the first time, but I realized that years later, I had so many more tools. And that second wave really, really impressed me in the way that I was able to handle it. So it really showed me how powerful having tools can be when you are feeling depressed, when you are kind of in that hole. I feel like the first time it may happen can be the most scary and daunting experience. And that self discovery journey really led me to so many more things. I ended up in California. I actually ended up releasing 60 pounds of weight, growing my business, so many good things, but it really required me to go into the mud. And so let's talk about, what does depression look like? Because I feel like I didn't even know I was depressed, honestly. Like it took the heartbreak to really take the lid off for me to realize. And I think a lot of people don't realize when they're depressed. So what are some symptoms, or what can depression look like, if we can talk to that? Anyone who wants to hop in?
Well, one thing I think that's important to point out before we get into a lot of the things that it can look like is, there is an official diagnosis for major depressive disorder. It's outlined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders from the American Psychiatric Association. So it includes it. It's a series of criteria. So you have to have more than 5 symptoms during the same 2-week period. That's different from the way things used to be, but things like depressed mood, loss of interest, insomnia or hypersomnia, meaning you sleep too much. So there's all these criteria, and I've certainly had patients who didn't fit the criteria exactly, but they were going through depression. So I think it's important just to understand that, there is like the official diagnosis, and your experience is entirely unique and your journey. So, and we all experience it a little bit differently. So one of the really unique things that I felt back during my days in college was that I actually couldn't see 2 weeks into the future. Like I couldn't imagine the world 2 weeks into the future. I didn't think I would make it. It was a unique feeling because people would make plans like, oh, okay, the quarter's almost over. Spring break's coming, and it was a complete disconnect. And interestingly enough, that's not something that I've come across many times. So again, everybody experiences it a little bit differently.
For me, I feel like peaks and valleys. So I'm a scientist by nature. I started off as a microbiologist and then got into business process analysis. So data is always like what helps to anchor me into things of like how to think about things. So I imagine like a graph and it's like up and down, just I call it my emotional load. And on any given day, I can start off and my emotional load's like super heavy. So I'm like way at the bottom of like feeling energetic, I guess. Yeah, so it's like, and I have this danger zone down at the bottom where it's like if it gets too heavy, like that's some serious stuff right there. Like I really need some help at that point. And so at any particular day, I can be like this constantly. Like everything could be going fine. Like from the outside, people will look and think, oh, you're having this really great, happy experience. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's like the floor can drop out from under me. And I'm just like down. And and it comes out of nowhere. And it's like I never know exactly what it's going to be. And there can be multiple triggers that happen in a day. So it's like I can like get out of one and then all of a sudden another one hits and it's like back down again. And I even found that it's a lot of the thoughts that pop up for me, a lot of the triggers that I see out in the environment that can pull up something from like 15 years ago, just like out of nowhere. I also found that food has an effect on me, and I didn't realize that. Like, I found that eating a sandwich, like the bread, it can make me just want to fall asleep within, 30 minutes of eating it. And just having that tiredness would trigger depression because then it's like all of the thoughts are jumping in saying, well, you need to push through. You can't do this. You don't have time to be sleepy. You have to get back to work and just push through it. And so then all of the shame spiral comes and just pulls me down even more. And um, some of the things that we turn to for comfort, sweet foods, chocolate, things like that, I didn't realize were actually making my depression worse. So a few years back, I started a new way of trying to lose weight, which takes out all flour and sugar, trying to get the hormones back into balance. And so after, I think I had gone about 2 months without flour or sugar, and then Valentine's Day hits, and I went and I had one piece of chocolate, and all of a sudden I was in like this awful depression that I hadn't felt in a long time. And I thought, from a piece of chocolate, like chocolate's supposed to make us feel better, right? That's when I started to try to understand the science of what was going on. Science, nature in me. It's like I always want to know why, what's going on inside of my body. And I took some clues as to, okay, what were some of the medicines that had helped me in the past? And so one of them had to do with the serotonin uptake. And so that's when I learned that sugar can bind to serotonin and actually make it drop. So although we get like this dopamine hit from having the sugar spike, it's also binding to the serotonin and pulling it down. And that takes a lot longer to recover from. And so that's why I was feeling this intense depression. And I realized, oh, I need to stay away from sugar so that I don't have depression. And it was a really eye-opening thing. And it's hard because we're so used to turning to it for that comfort. But for me, it really does cause my depression to get worse.
I love that you brought up diet and nutrition, and I love that you come at this from with your scientific background because I'm an artist, and so I come at everything from a sort of creative background, and everything is marked in my life by a measure of my creativity, and so understanding how key of a role nutrition can play is so important, especially for people like me who aren't necessarily like sort of tracking the subtleties of what changes in our energy from moment to moment, which is what you're speaking to, because it's sort of a very subtle thing to realize like, okay, this physical chemical caused this subtle emotional shift, which then caused a precipitous drop in my mood, right? Like there's like a few connections in a row that have to be made, and I don't necessarily always track the data that way, so it's beautiful to hear that. In answer to the original question, how I can see or experience when I'm in those sort of depressive states is like a feeling of being totally immobile and wanting to give up. Like, as a person who creates as part of my livelihood, and creating is an inborn part of my identity, much like you were alluding to, Dr. K, with like being the smart kid was part of your identity. Being a creator is part of mine. And so I can always feel the depression sort of threatening me, threatening me when I feel the total creative blocks, excuse me, or when I feel the need to give up, or when everything feels like an effort, when it's like just taking out the paintbrush feels like, oh my God, it's in the closet. What the hell? Like, and the closet's 2 feet away. So like, what the heck am I talking about? But that feels like a bit like, if the closet door was already open, okay, then maybe I could get out the paintbrush, but it's closed. And so there's just no way I'm going to get the paintbrush out. Right. So it's like the amount of effort to do every small task becomes huge. And it's like, so picking up a paintbrush becomes the same as scaling a mountain. And that to me is like a real sign that, okay, I've got to investigate my thinking again and figure out, what am I believing that got me to this place? Because depression doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a result of our environment and our culture. Like Aditi, I really loved what you said about no one can find the answer but yourself, right? And it's like we that doesn't mean you're on your own out there. If you're listening to this and you're struggling with depression, like I'm a coach. There's millions of coaches. We can help you. There's therapists out there. But the inner wisdom that will take and lift that depression comes from within. Anyone that you go to for counseling or guidance can just help you find your answer. But we all have the answers within us. We really do. And they're connected to our bodies, right? Which is where it's so important to reestablish a mind-body connection, which is why I love, Gretchen, what you brought in about nutrition, because they are all related. And our bodies are constantly giving us signals about how to be and which way to go. And our culture doesn't teach us anything about that. It teaches us about our mind and achievement, and that's it. And right. And so, Aditi, I also love in your story how you said you started following your calling and you thought, now I'm on the path of roses, and then you still ended up in depression. Because it's important to follow that path. It's important to follow that calling, but then it's also important, while on the pursuit of your passion, that you're investigating your thinking and being clear on what you're believing, because what you believe will have a profound effect on the experience and quality of your being, moment to moment, day to day.
So beautiful. Wow. I love everything everyone shared, and I definitely relate to a lot of it. Gretchen, definitely the bread thing, 30 minutes passed down. And I realized if I got important work to do, there will be no bread today. So definitely relate to that. And for me, I find that similar to what Brian was saying, is that for me, it would feel like this heaviness, almost like there is these weights on my body that I'm like, it's this heavy book bag I'm carrying with me that I can't take off. Like, it's stuck to me. And even basic things sometimes are really hard to do. And of course, there are levels, right? There's mild depression. It can go to a very extreme level. So, what you experience, as Dr. K said, it's going to be an individual experience. I've had moments where it was just so hard to even get out of bed and take a shower. But I've also had moments where I was functional. I was doing what I needed to do, going to the store, even working, taking calls. But there was just this low grade depression in the background, this heaviness that I'm carrying around with me. So I think that awareness really helps you kind of see where you're at. So you can see, like, is this my normal optimal functioning to feel this heaviness? And unfortunately for me, I was carrying this heaviness for so long that I just thought it was normal. And I just thought, maybe everyone just has this weight on them, and this is just how it is. And I didn't realize until I really started unpacking the layers that no, actually, this is very hard, and this isn't the way everyone is living. So it's really powerful to be able to kind of just tune in to see what your depression feels like, because that can give you a lot of answers on how you can work through it. So let's talk about, what are some tips to navigate depression?
Can I just speak to what you just mentioned about tuning into your body to understand how the depression feels within you, or what it might look like within you? I just think there's something really important to note there about making sure that you're connected to your own body's awareness, right? Like, it seems like, okay, if you're depressed, then you might not even have the energy necessarily to want to think all this through, but understanding what's happening in your own body is so key in terms of being able to figure out what solutions lie in front of you, because the solutions that lie in front of you are a result of whatever your body's signals are. So whatever your body is telling you about the depression can reveal something to you about how that depression is made manifest, or how it's triggered in your life, or even how to overcome it.
So as far as tips to navigate depression, I would actually zoom it out to, what are some of the habits to create strong mental health and emotional health altogether, right? Because sometimes, when we look at an illness, whether it's mental, physical, we look at, okay, what do I have to do to fix that one illness? And sometimes what we forget is that there are some underlying habits, routines, ways of living, lifestyle factors that really do go a long way to giving us the best chance to then do the work necessary to overcome the specific challenge, if it doesn't happen to go away on its own just from that. So as an emotional health mentor, I talk about what I call the 5 pillars of emotional health. Number 1, your psychology. So this is your default belief patterns, your history of trauma, your the way you talk to yourself, your emotional intelligence. Number 2, your relationships. We're the average of the 5 people and ideas that we spend the most time with. And certainly in the state of depression, if you have people in your immediate 5 that effectively are contributing to that challenge, it's probably wise to find other people to spend some time with wherever possible, or at least inject other ideas, whether it's podcasts, whatever it is, so that you're flooding your mind with different ideas and different ways of being. Number 3, nutrition, and I'm going to come back to this. Number 4, sleep, and number 5, body movement. So, and when I say body movement, I don't mean you're feeling depressed, go exercise, you'll feel good. That's not the point. The point is that, and I've had, again, patients that have just done this and it's gone such a long way. It's that incremental, okay, you know what? If nothing else, I'm at least going to go for a walk in the morning and get the sun on my face in the morning, right after I wake up. And one day after the next, and all of a sudden they're feeling a little bit more energized. Not that depression's necessarily gone, but a little bit more energized, a little bit more blood flow. Maybe they're losing a little weight, and that starts to add a little bit of wins. And then as time goes on, we start to feed the process of neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to remodel and heal itself. And we're using your body's ability to heal itself to overcome the challenge that you're dealing with. So going back to nutrition, and I love, Gretchen, that you brought this up. You cannot disconnect gut health and brain health. They go hand in hand. And there's so many factors in terms of what we eat. We eat so much processed food, refined sugars, oils, highly processed animal products, everything else that amplifies a gut microbiome. So what is that? There's 100 trillion bacteria that live in your gut. And 90% of the neurotransmitters, the chemicals that go between nerve cells and basically control how you think, act, and feel, 90% of them are created and regulated in your gut. The food that you eat has a direct impact on the chemical messengers of how your brain works. So it's really important to eat natural food that will allow you to basically function the way we were designed to function. So when I talk about my 5 pillars from a nutrition standpoint, the number 1 factor is fiber, high fiber plant foods. So there's really no substitute for that. So, again, your dark leafy greens are a big win, but also fruit. And again, everyone's body is a little bit different. It's not individualized medical advice here for sure. But nonetheless, those are some of the things that you might want to look at. And one book that I would recommend, and it's not exactly within arm's reach, so I'm not going to grab it right now, but it's called Fiber Fueled. So definitely pick that up. It's again for gut health on the whole, but gut health and brain health intimately connected.
there's something about, I love what you just said. Thank you for bringing that up about the gut, because there's a recent scientific discovery. I don't remember the exact citation, where it talks about how our brains process 40 bits of information per second, whereas our body processes 11 million bits of information per second, right? So our body is this very, very wise machine that's evolved over millions and millions of eons. And our brain is relatively new, especially the frontal lobe and the neocortex, right? So as far as listening to your body's signals and not being able to disconnect the brain from the gut, there's something else that's interesting to me, because the gut is lined with the same kind of cells that we have in our brain. And so our gut is doing its own version of thinking. Our gut is able to reason, our gut is able to think things through and plan and guide us. Yet the difference is that our gut doesn't speak in English. It doesn't speak in language. It only speaks in signals. So the healthier that your gut is, the healthier your brain body connection is, the more clearly you can understand those signals. But those signals are coming from a gut brain, right? Like what you're saying about how 90% of the neurotransmitters that dictate how we think, act, and feel come from the gut. That's true. And there's like a real level of guidance and thinking that's coming out of our gut. It's where we get the expression, your gut feeling, follow your gut instincts. Like, these tricks of language are not an accident. They always come from some deeper truth underneath the cliche. And the cliche of a gut feeling is deeply true scientifically, that there is something to be said there. So I love that you said that. And this brings me back to something I was trying to say before with Aditi, talking about confronting where the depression is in your body. It's so important to come at any struggle like this from a place of acceptance. Like, we don't want to feel depression. And so we're going to try to avoid it, and we're going to try to white knuckle our way out of it. But that's not possible. You can't get from A to B through that kind of stressful effort, especially when B is a place of no stress. So it just doesn't make any logical sense, right? Like, you can't get to a place of no stress from stressful effort. So it's so important to look directly at your body. Where is this happening in my body? Where is the depression? What does it feel like? And become really familiar with it and accustomed to it, because that doesn't mean that you're giving in or giving up. It means that you're saying, I am not going to be cured through a struggle. I'm going to be cured, for lack of a handier phrase to put this, through awareness. It's through awareness. Awareness is like 95% of the process of transformation. And we know that 99.9% of all percentages are made up on the spot. But it's, in there somewhere. Like, a very high level of transformation comes through awareness alone. When you have the awareness of where is the depression affecting me in my body? What is the thinking behind it? It's only a matter of time before that depression gives way to something new. You can shift. It shifts. You don't struggle away from it. You shift from it. So it's not a battle with depression. It's a battle with the expectation that I shouldn't feel depressed. And when you let that battle go and accept that state of depression, that's when real shifting can happen, because that shifting happens in spite of you, not because of your effort. I hope that makes sense.
Brian, I just got to quickly piggyback on that. That was so beautiful and so right, because think about it. When we're a kid and we're riding our bike for the first time without training wheels, and we fall off and we scrape our knee, right? What happens?
We
we
freak
go
out.
inside, we wash, maybe some Neosporin, bandage it up, and it heals. But somehow when we have an internal wounding, right? And especially around identity that can affect, and allow us to feel depression, things like that. We're like, I want to cut it out of me. I want to get rid of it. I want to, we antagonize it. But when we antagonize it, it gets worse. Whereas, you wouldn't antagonize the bruise. You wouldn't antagonize the scrape, right? You would nurture it and heal it. And so I think it's important to really, again, that aspect of letting go, and to just recognize, what if this was happening for me? What if this is what I need to go through in order to get to some other side that I would have never been able to get to otherwise? And it's living in that possibility that starts to open our mind, and again, feeds that neuroplasticity so that we can really evolve into the highest level of ourself.
You guys have inspired me so much. There's so many things that you keep bringing up that I'm like, oh, and this, right? So, Brian, you had mentioned something about goals. And I find that for me, I actually started what I called Project Me years back because I was like, okay, I need to allow time for me. It was so hard letting go of wanting to be there for everybody else, but it was for my own survival. It was like putting on my own oxygen mask first. And so, my goal was to decrease the amount of depression, like looking at the number of days. And I had to start with within a day, like, how could I decrease the amount of depressive feelings that day? And there was one where it was all about self-love. Like, I didn't have self-love for myself. And so I started to think, okay, well, what are nice things that I could do for myself? And so back when my depression was super, super bad, cleaning the house was always a shameful thing for me. Like, I would beat myself up, like, oh, look at this mess. Like, get out there, like, shame myself into doing it. Like, that was my motivation, shame. Like, that. So that's great. Shame yourself, create more depression as a motivator. Totally doesn't work. So I wanted to create a great environment for myself. And I started thinking, well, where do I go where I feel great when I walk in? And for me, it was hotel rooms, like walking into a nice hotel room and it's really clean. There's not a whole lot of clutter. Like, it's there and like very welcoming. And then I'm looking at my bedroom and I'm like, okay, nowhere close to what a hotel bedroom looks like. And I went into my bathroom and it's like, this does not look like a hotel bathroom. And I'm just like looking at this dirty sink in front of me. And so my old patterns of behavior thinking, oh, it's so disgusting, like, and so the shame motivator was coming back in. And I thought, no, 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 I'm going to set a goal for myself of create my bathroom and bedroom to look like a hotel room for me so that I have a place when I walk in that I can just be like, and just feel that relaxed, peaceful nature. So I'm looking at this one sink and I didn't have much energy that day. Like, the depression was really heavy. And I thought, okay, but if this was clean like a hotel sink, I could look at this and I could feel good. And so I took out a sponge and I cleaned it. And it took all of like 2 minutes. But this time it was from a different place of motivation. It was, I wanted to do something nice for myself by creating a hotel sink in front of me. So I did that. And then I'm staring down at this sink and it's like sparkling clean. And I remember looking up into the mirror and crying because I had all of this gratitude for myself for having done something so kind. And it's like I like looked up, saw the rest of my bathroom, and I was like, oh man, so it's like all those start, and it's like, no, no, no. I'm not even going to look at any of the rest of the room. I'm just going to stare at this clean sink. And the amount of gratitude that I felt was just overwhelming. And it's like, it was one of the first times I could look into the mirror, into my own eyes, and say, I love you. And it was like, it felt like weird and creepy at first, but then it was just like that sense of love, like starting to fill my chest. And it was like just from a sink, from one sink. It's like it really does start off that small with our goals toward trying to get out of our depression. So, and Dr. K, you had mentioned about movement. And one of the things that I experienced this last Christmas was I started to feel myself falling, like, my energy was dropping again. And I thought, you know what? I am going to go find some things on YouTube and I'm going to dance with my kids in the living room. And just, I was looking for some karaoke songs. I run a men's support group on Wednesday nights, and I wanted to bring in some songs that we could all sing together. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go and listen to some of these songs. And I pulled up this song my husband hates. It's called Dominic the Donkey. And Chris, I know you're on the line. He's one of my friends, and he got to experience Dominic the Donkey. I know he's laughing right now, but it can be really annoying for people, which is part of the fun. And so I played it and I started dancing, and it was just that movement. And just the sheer joy of it all. And I think I played it 4 times in a row. Like I felt like I was a 5-year-old, always wanting to play the same song over and over again. But all of a sudden I'm dancing. So I went from like depression way down here to my energy being up here because I was dancing to a silly song. And it's like, it's just those little incremental things that we can do. And all of it adds up to concentrating our joy, adding joy back into our life, and having us feel some self gratitude for things that we do for ourselves.
Beautiful. I love that so much. So many tips. Hope you guys are taking some notes, but you'll definitely get the replay mailed to you as well. A few things that I'll share is really having compassion, having compassion for yourself as you're going through whatever emotions you're going through. I find that my resistance towards my depression actually caused it to be way more painful than it needed to be. When I look back at those 2 years where I was in my deepest depression, it was just like I was trying to escape it so hard, trying to escape my body, trying to escape this experience, all these feelings I was having. And it just made it that much more painful because I felt trapped. I was like, I can't get out of here, but I need to get out of here. What's going on? Why do I feel this way? This is not okay. I'm not normal. Why can't I be like them? Just all of the stuff. But if I were to just be like, it's okay to feel how you're feeling right now. If I could just go back to my past self and say that, it would have decreased so much heartache that I had. We have this idea that something is wrong and this is bad. But what if it's not bad? What if the depression is here because it's our teacher? What if it's here because it's here to show us something, to give us a message, to maybe bring us back to our ultimate joy? At that point, I was in such a dark misery that I couldn't see anything outside of that. But if I knew that this misery was actually going to be leading me to my next chapter, to my next place, maybe I wouldn't have been so much of in a battle with it at the time. You know what I mean? So, really gentle acceptance. Maybe you can't give full acceptance, but even just a little bit of gentle acceptance that, you know what, I know that you don't like the way you're feeling right now, but it's safe to feel how you're feeling right now. And just be able to have this compassion for yourself, create a visual bubble around you of love, because in those moments, it's love and to be held is what we need more than ever. And sometimes we can't express that to others, but being able to be that person for yourself can be so, so powerful. Because I know I remember during that time, one, I don't think I realized how depressed I was, and nor did I want to talk to anybody about it. So I completely shut myself off from the world. I stopped talking to everybody in my life. Like I just really went into a hole. But if I were to just be able to hold that space for myself, that is really powerful. So how can you hold that space for yourself with whatever you're feeling right now, even if it's not depression, even if it's just anger or any sort of emotion that you're feeling, having that compassion for yourself, saying some kind words to yourself, and also just not trying to take yourself to the next level. How can you just take one step at a time, Oh, I woke up today, I'm winning. How can you celebrate those small things? And like Gretchen said, like the small goals. I remember Katie Byron talks about in one of her books, like to listen to that small voice in your head, because that small voice will always give you that next step. And sometimes it's, hey, go do the dishes right now. And then after you do the dishes, like you'll get a nudge on like what to do next. Okay, now I'll take a shower, or okay, now I feel called to go outside. And it's very subtle. If you can pay attention to those nudges you get over these next 7 days, right? You might feel, sometimes I'll be working and I'll just feel this nudge that I need to go outside, and I don't know why I'm feeling it until I look at the clock. I've been sitting down for 3 hours. I'm like, you better get your booty up and move your body or do something. You can just feel your like Dr. K says our body is self-healing. I think our body always knows what the medicine is for us. So how can you listen to that voice? How can you be kind with yourself? And how can you give yourself space to feel whatever it is that you're feeling? All right.
Aditi,
So
you
next, I
brought
want to,
up something.
yeah, go
Is it
ahead.
okay if I? Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah.
You brought up something that was such a great point, which was that sometimes what we're going through, like there's a golden reason for it. Like I can't remember how you put it, but there's times where I start to experience things, especially running my own business, where um, thoughts will come up and I'll start beating myself up and start feeling awful, like say around bookkeeping, right? It's like as a entrepreneur, like you're responsible for making your own income. And so when you're looking at your expenses and your income, like all of a sudden that can bring all sorts of stuff to us, right? But how I helped myself get through that was knowing that at some point the clients that I coach, they're going to be going through that same thing. And so when I can take that time and start writing down what are all of the thoughts that I'm having, what's coming up for me, and I can do some mindset work around it so that I can shift through it. Then when my clients come to me and they have those same things, I have my notes there ready where I can say, ah, yes, I was feeling this way too. Or I might even offer it before they even say anything because not everybody wants to talk about their stuff. So I like to share my stuff first because it dissolves the shame about talking about it. And then I can show, yep, I went from this and then I thought about it this way. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, that was really helpful. So now I almost welcome all of the mind drama to come up because it's giving me all of the stuff that I know will help me to be able to help other people later on.
So powerful. I love that. And this is definitely one of my favorite things that I wanted to ask because it's something I've struggled with. So I'd love to hear how all of you have kind of navigated through it. It's like how do you navigate like being in public or going to an event or being at a family event or even having to make it through your workday when you're feeling super depressed? I know I've been through these moments before where there were moments where I was just in such a low place and I couldn't stop tearing up, and I had to go to a few like events where there are people and I had to engage and all these other things. I could have stayed home, but I think that would have created a bigger kind of thing around it. And I didn't want to bring attention to myself. So I just went. So I'd love to hear any tips on how to navigate being in public or interacting with people when you are feeling super depressed.
I'd love to share on that. And I also want to say, so something, Gretchen, that you said about welcoming the mind stuff. I think that's so important too, because we were talking about the more we've all touched on this a little bit. So I just want to reiterate it for everybody watching that the more aware you become of the content of your thinking, the more tools you have to shift your life experience, because our life experience comes from our thinking. In our culture, we're taught there's a circumstance, and that circumstance then causes a reaction. And then now I'm thinking some way about it, and then that triggers a feeling, and then that triggers my behavior. But that's 100% backwards. The truth is, our thoughts are at the beginning, and whatever thoughts you have trigger emotional experiences. Whatever emotional experiences you have trigger your behavior and your actions, because we are emotional creatures driven by our emotions. That's true for everybody, no matter how much mindset work you do. So your thoughts create your emotions cause your actions and behavior. Your actions and behavior are the biggest percentage of what causes your life experience, not random circumstances from about you, right? And so the more aware you can become of the content of your thoughts, of your inner narrative, the more agency you have over whatever emotional state you're in, whether that's depression or anything else. And uh, in answer to your question, Aditi, there's a tool that we use in my life coaching called the 3 Bs. It's taught to us by Martha Beck. So if anyone isn't familiar with Martha Beck, I really encourage you to look up her works. She's amazing. But the 3 Bs tool is basically, you can look at something on your list, and you take one of these 3 Bs: bag it, barter it, or better it. So the first thing I would say is, if you're in a real emotionally raw state, do you have to do the thing? Can you just bag it? And if you can bag it, and it's not going to cause any inherent consequences in your life, then you have every right to bag it. We're at a self-care summit. And so if your body is in an uproar about not wanting to go to a family function, but the reason you think you need to go is some cultural rule about it, or because your mother-in-law is going to freak out that you don't go, then you just don't have to go, because we're talking about self-care. not other care, self-care. So that's one. It's like bag it. If you can bag it, bag it. And if you can barter it, then barter it. So if it's like the depression is being caused and the overwhelm is being caused because you don't know how to design a website, for example, and you're just thinking, well, I need to do this because I have the free time and I'm going to do it, and then it's causing you this emotional onslaught, maybe that's a candidate for bartering it, right? Like you can trade one of your services for somebody to work on your website who's an expert at that stuff, or you can barter with money. Barter's just a fancy word because it starts with B, but you can also pay as a form of barter. And then the last one is to better it, and the better it one, I think, is where the juice really is in answer to your question, Aditi, because if you need to do things and you're feeling in an emotional place where you're really not ready, but you can't barter it or you can't bag it, then this is where you can better it. And bettering it just means it's also about awareness. It's understanding who you are and what you love. Because for example, I've had things that I've had to do that just feel like they fill me with dread, right? And it's like, okay, so if I do that with a latte in my hand and with a book on tape, and maybe I'm wrapped in a blanket, or I've agreed and told my essential self, which is the part of me that gets all the rewards when my social self does the stuff that he has to do that he doesn't want to do, then I can tell my essential self, okay, we're going to go to the park after, or we're going to go to a movie after. The key is whatever deal you make with your essential self, once your social self follows through on the crap you had to do, you have to keep that deal and you have to follow through on the reward, because your essential self can be bribed to feel better, but it also will, you can break trust with it. So you have to do it. Like make a deal with yourself and keep the deal. And you can be as creative as you want to find any way that the sky's the limit in terms of the ways in which you can better something. So whatever it would be to make a dreadful thing better, like if it's an appointment to the dentist, right? Then maybe you bring a friend with you who's awesome enough to hang out and read a book while you're at the dentist, and then you guys go for dinner together. Whatever it is, whatever you can arrange to make these mountainous tasks like going to a family engagement when you're depressed better, you have every right to do. And that's what self-care is. It's just like really understanding, like, I'm important. And the oxygen mask, I think it was you, Gretchen, that brought this up. That's a great analogy, because if you don't put on your own oxygen mask first, you're dead. So you literally can be of no help to anyone at all. So you really, self-care is so important. And I think this 3Bs tool has helped me make small incremental progress in so many areas where I was completely stuck before, because I was thinking I had to break off giant chunks, or I was thinking I have to do something that my internal self is saying I don't want to do. And the 3Bs tool is a way to sort of push ever so gently into that resistance. So rather than, if you push hard against resistance, you feel the resistance. But if you just push ever so gently, you're kind of like climbing over it. You know what I mean? So that's what I want to say about a sort of a tip to bring with you as you uh, navigate your emotional states of being and navigate the real world at the same time.
I can add in a few. So I found that if I can plan ahead of time, if I anticipate certain circumstances are going to happen at that event, different people that I might talk to, different triggers that I'm aware of, I write them all out and I try to think of what are other ways that I can think about those circumstances that I'm going to encounter that are going to create some other feeling for me. And so humor or love tend to be really good feelings for me. Love especially. Whatever that where I'm going to go to. It's like, how can I think about this one triggering thing that was going to cause depression? How can I think about that in a way that's going to generate love for the other person, or love for me, or love for the environment? And then that makes it so much easier. Then when I get into that situation, that trigger is there. And at first, my brain, of course, wants to go into default thought patterns of, oh, here's this thing, think a bad thought, and boom, I'm into depression again. It's like, nope, I remind myself. Sometimes I write it down on a Post-it note and I carry it with me in my pocket to remind myself. It's like, no, I already planned on thinking about this way. And then I practice it over and over again. And so once I practice it over and over again with that circumstance, like I challenge myself to get into those circumstances again so that I can retrain my brain on how to think about it. And then I also have some backup things that I use to bring some joy to me in those moments. So I use my five senses. So experimented with different lotions, and someone had taught me this trick of putting a little bit of lotion right underneath my nose so that I could smell it. And so I found that a lavender and cedar wood works really well to make me feel really good and peaceful. So if I go somewhere and I know that it's going to have a lot of triggers for me, either for depression or anxiety or my other triggers, I have that. So it's like I'm always smelling it. I might also have certain fabric with me. So either my clothing itself is a fabric that when I feel it, it brings me that sense of calm or love, or it might be a little piece that's in my pocket. There might be a little toy that I would carry in my pocket. I have this cute little owl that is very colorful that's in my car. And that helps me like when I'm driving around, because sometimes traffic can cause depression, especially when it's a traffic jam and it feels super hard, because it brings in this thought that I have been trying to shake forever of life is just hard. And when you're super crowded and you just want to get from point A to point B and it's super crowded, yeah, that's pretty hard. So it's like I just redirect over to this fun little thing, and I'm not thinking about how hard it is anymore. Now I'm thinking about this thing. And nature, Aditi, you had mentioned something about getting out into nature. So practicing getting present with things where it's like clearing your mind. And that really is a practice to try to get into. But going out and being with nature or looking through a window, right? Because you might be in an event where there's a whole bunch of people, but if you can look out and see trees, like for me, seeing the leaves moving or sunlight going through the leaves, that helps me to get present. So it's like I might even like kind of tune out everything else that's going on at that event so that I can be present with nature. Because when you realize that you're there just like the leaf is. We're here for the same purpose, just to live, just to breathe, just to enjoy our existence on the planet. It kind of makes the rest of it not matter. And now everything can just like dissolve away. And moving water, that one is my number one go to. So if that's even why I moved out to the coast so that I could be here with the moving water all the time. And so if you're not fortunate enough to live next to a large body of water that is moving, even having a fountain, like you can go and purchase those for like $20 at the store, and you can just watch the water moving down, and you can get lost in the movement of that water. It helps you to get present, and it escapes from the rest of the thoughts for a moment.
I love that. I love the moving water. I feel like you just talking right now, I just felt so calm. All right. So we're already at the top of the hour. I feel like we could go on for another hour, but there's so much more to cover. But this has been such an awesome conversation. I would love for each of you to share who you are, what you do, where people can find you. And then after we do that, then we're going to do one last closing statement. So go ahead, Dr. K.
I'm Dr. Karthik Ramanan. I go by Dr. K for ease. I'm a naturopathic physician and emotional health mentor. I do periodic online group classes for various topics like end self-criticism, good mood plant food, how to implement nutrition to get your best emotional health. I have one coming up, at least at the time of recording, for conquering comparison, and another one soon for rescuing rest, because again, us high achievers tend to put sleep off when we really probably shouldn't. So you can find me at drkarthikramanan.com or drknmd.com. That'll take you there as well. Find me on the social platforms, YouTube, Instagram, all those things.
Either of you, go ahead.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead, Brian.
Gretchen. Oh, you go first.
I am Gretchen Hernandez. I am a business process and mindset coach. I help solopreneurs to be able to design a business in harmony with their mental health. And I have one-on-one and group coaching. And my group coaching, it's called Unshakable. I help people to learn how to be unshakable emotionally around anybody and any person, and also all of the stuff that comes up with running a business. And there's a separate men and women's group because I want people to be able to talk about really what's going on for them. And sometimes men want to share things they don't feel comfortable sharing in front of women, and likewise, women the same. So I also have a podcast called My Freedom Grove, and I go into all of the different mindset stuff and also the different process obstacles that we encounter. So I am located at myfreedomgrove.com for anyone who would like to connect and chat.
And my name is Brian Hogan. I'm a clarity coach and a writer and a filmmaker. And my work revolves around helping people learn to find and trust their own inner wisdom. I use metaphysics, modern science, and ancient wisdom to help people unlock the truth that's already held inside their bodies. This is mainly done through an inner narrative technique that I've developed called life story hacking. You can find more about this at lifestoryhacking.com. But essentially, it's learning how to identify, question, then surrender to, and ultimately rewrite your own inner narrative. So you can find more about that at lifestoryhacking.com, where we can coach together, or you can also just read more about it and do the life story hacking process on your own by reading stuff on the blog.
So good. So, my name is Aditi. I am the host of the Self Care Summit. I help professionals transform their stress with the use of self care, hence the Self Care Summit. And my first ever book is going to be pre launching this week. It is a book on self care, which I'm super excited about. My first book idea was 10 years ago. So, talk about conquering fears. Yeah. So, you guys can join the book waitlist at aditicreative.com/book launch. I'm going to have early bird bonuses for those who are signing up on the waitlist. And again, if you are not already signed up for the summit and you want to be able to get the replays and everything, you can make sure to sign up at aditicreative.com/summit. And you can find me on Instagram at Aditi Creative as well. All right. So to wrap up, my last question to leave us all with is, what's one thing, one message you like to share with someone who is struggling with depression right now?
Your mental health is more important than anything. Whenever you feel pressure to do something, just always check in with yourself and say, is this good for my mental health? And if it's not, then don't do it. Your mental health is more important than anything.
I'd like to say that um, this too shall pass. And the way I know that that's true is because every emotion that you've ever had has been temporary. That's been true for your entire life. And that's going to be true about this too. So this too shall pass. Let Ride the wave if you can, ride the wave with as much acceptance as you can, and the wave ends up being less intense. But you're not alone in this. There's all kinds of help out there for you as well.
Who were you before the world told you who to be? It may feel like you're broken, but what if you were not broken? What if this was happening for you? Look, rock bottom sucks, but it's a beautiful place to be, because rock bottom is where you have nothing to lose. Rock bottom is your launching pad. So what if your future self could look back on your depression today and say, I would have never been here if not for that pain. If it wasn't for my dark years, if it wasn't for rock bottom, I wouldn't have switched to a whole food plant-based diet. If it wasn't for rock bottom, I wouldn't have lost 100 pounds. If it wasn't for rock bottom, I wouldn't have left my career on Wall Street to become a naturopathic doctor. If it wasn't for rock bottom, I wouldn't have met the woman of my dreams and been in the place that I am today, getting to serve you. Pain is a gift if we allow it to be, so never let your pain go to waste.
Ooh, y'all are giving me chills. So good. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to leave you with the fact that you are not alone. Your depression does not mean anything bad about you. There is a gift waiting for you inside of it. So don't be afraid to dig deeper. Thank you guys for tuning in. We have another panel tomorrow, so hope to see you there.